And we're going to move into the closing part of our webinar. And I'm really delighted that we have Dr. Niall Muldoon with us to close the webinar. Actually, Niall, I don't see, oh yes, I remember you're showing up in a different, suddenly had a moment where I can't see you on the screen, so there we are. So I'm just going to bring you up onto the main screen, and thank you so much, Niall, for you've got a space here just to close the webinar for us with your closing comments.
Thank you very much, Ali. Maybe how long do you think do you want me to take?
Yeah,
minutes?
We actually have 10 minutes would be wonderful. Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yes,
okay,
that's perfect.
Okay, thank you very much, Ali, and thank you very much to Barry and all the team at the Dún Laoghaire and the Bray Alcohol Drug Task Force for setting this up and for the invitation. I'm really honoured to be here. Maybe just before I go on, I just want to also welcome the fact, and Audrey touched on it, the consultation that you're doing, I think, within the Dún Laoghaire is really highlighting children's rights again. You know, the fact that you're doing separate consultations for young people, separate consultations for families, it means that those children are being heard in a way that allows them to know that they're important. So again, you're living and breathing children's rights, and I think that's a great example. Maybe a little bit about ourselves, just quickly. I'll just say that, you know, the Ombudsman for Children's Office is an independent, independent statutorily set up organisation to work for children, promote and protect children's rights. And the work you're doing here, all of you involved in this work, is hugely important, because one of the phrases I love is keeping children's rights real in the small places where they live. And that's what you're doing, the work you're doing all the time. The impact of COVID, again, you've laid it out brilliantly between Jennifer and Sharon and the other speakers, Nicola and Caroline. The fact that our whole system and our whole society shut down and we all retreated inside our own houses changed the world for our children enormously. And any children who were living in a house where there was cracks already, where there was vulnerabilities already, were really exposed. You know, school, we've learned, and so one thing I think we will all take with us into the future, I hope, that education, or Department of Education in schools, are not just about education. They're about children's lives, children's worth, children's safety and security. It's where they learn to live in a different way, where they learn to grow, where they learn to make friendships, to have falling outs, but also in the children who are vulnerable, it's where they're seen. And you touched on that as well. The story of Danny was fantastic. The teacher sees the child. At home, there's been big changes that put pressure on the parents who are already vulnerable, you know, having to work from home with all your children around you, having to do the homeschooling, having to keep everything else running, and not having a social outlet and a place to recharge yourself makes life much more difficult. Work changed for all of us, and society itself just shut down. So you didn't have that sort of, and I can see it, without any vulnerabilities in our house, there's just no place for us to go and recharge and get the energy back. So those children are living in really difficult situations. Let me acknowledge too the work that's been done with the government. At long last, they're moving forward on the minimum unit pricing. You know, that's taken a long time, but again, it's really important that the government takes on the fight and puts children and young people ahead of the vested interests and the large lobby groups, so that we know that'll make a difference. It's been shown in Scotland that you can reduce the use of alcohol that way. That's a really huge step forward. Maybe what I'll say a little bit about the work that within our office. I was lucky to meet up with Sheila Gilheeney and Alcohol Action Ireland a couple of years ago, and they invited me to the Silent Voices. I think it was the launch, and Fergal Keane spoke there, and I think he was just so powerful. I've taken a quote from him. I've used it a number of times. He talked about, he was asked what was the biggest impact of living with alcohol and your parents and your family, and he said growing up with the shame as your second skin. And he said it had a profound impact on him. And he said the second problem, or the second impact, was the immense grief for the parent you lost and the childhood you could have had. That's the second one. The immense grief is something you learn with maturity, but the shame is something that children put on as they go along. And again, that's because they're not seen. Shame comes side by side with silence and secrecy. And if you're living with a parent with addiction of any sort, you tend to be taught, and you learn it yourself, to keep it silent, to keep it quiet. Don't let anybody know, otherwise bad things will happen. And we know in Ireland the years upon decades of secrecies and how bad it has been for us when we do keep things secret, and how bad it is for our children if they're asked to keep secrets. So if we make it real and we make it back to my job, children's rights, what happens in a child living in those sort of circumstances is their right to family life is disturbed. Their right to life, survival, and development, so the whole development of them as a child is disturbed. Their right to protection from harm and abuse is lost. And those are the core values that are lost in many times, but that will then impact on other rights. So the right to education, even if they turn up in school, they may be hungry, they may be tired, they may be distracted, they may be afraid of what's happening for their siblings, they may be afraid about money, whatever it might be. Their right to health is disturbed because parents may not bring them to the GP, whatever, the money might not be there. There could be all sorts of other issues. And even the simple one, like the right to rest and play, is hugely impacted because they become much more serious. And that's where I come across a lot of these children, is in the role of young carers. They become mature too young, and they have to deal with the adult world in a way that's not what's supposed to happen for their life cycle. And that's really, really important that we try and prevent that happening. And the work you're doing is fantastic to make sure that they're seen and supported so they don't have to carry that burden as an adult, like an adult would. Through the work of Alcohol Action Ireland, I heard about Operation Encompass, and I know Jennifer touched on it earlier on. It's a fantastic idea. To me, it's so simple. And again, some of the mental media there talked about interagency cooperation and the sharing of information. I was involved with the Department of Children, the Special Rapporteur Jeffrey Shannon, the Guards, Department of Justice, Department of Health, in helping to bring about a thing called the Barna House model in Galway, which is where they have a one-stop shop for children who have allegations of sexual abuse. Guards, social workers, therapists, well, therapists aren't quite there yet, but they will be soon, hopefully. Medical forensic people all work together on the one site so that the child doesn't have to go to various different places, and they only tell their story once or twice, and they share the information. And it's the most liberating thing that the child doesn't have to repeat their story. So the sharing of information, myself and Jeffrey Shannon pushed the government and the Guards to tell us why they wouldn't share information with TUSLA and with HIT social workers around child protection issues. And they felt there was something legally wrong. We said, we rewrite the law in order to make that work. And after 6 or 7 months of intense work, they found that it was just practice. There was nothing wrong with the legislation. If the practice that had grown up is that you wouldn't share information. And that's something we have to get over very quickly. We need to share information across the agencies to protect our children and to allow those children to thrive in the best way possible. They've done that now in Barna House, so hopefully that'll be replicated in other areas. And I think Operation Encompass is exactly the same thing. I felt so strongly about it that I've written, and I've often done this, I've written to Minister for Justice, Minister for Education, and Minister for Children, asking them to support the idea of the Operation Encompass. And I've also spoken directly with the two people who set it up, Elizabeth and David Carney Hayworth in England. And just, it's such a powerful idea that a child who suffers through an event at night, say 10 o'clock at night, the Guards are called for whatever reason to their house. And again, that rationale, whatever the reason, doesn't matter. If a guard comes to your house, that's traumatic. You know, that's not normal. It doesn't happen in every childhood. So it's important that those children are told that there's something different there. The guard then just has to inform one professional within the school setting and said there was an Operation Encompass event last night. That's all that happens. No more detail, no more big getting into it. But the teachers then know they have something they can do. They have a child coming in the gate, and they may just watch that child, do nothing else. They might just make sure they're okay. They may talk to them, they may not. But what happens is information is power. And within Operation Encompass, the teachers who previously were struggling to figure out, as Danny's teacher was, what's going on here, and trying to hypothesize what the problems are, they now know what the problem is, and they know how to create a solution. And they can do something much more tangible and much more direct. It's absolutely costs nothing more. Teachers are already doing it. They're struggling with those children already, trying to find a way in. Now they know, okay, we might need to let them off the homework. We might need to help them with a bit of food. We might need to just keep an eye and say nothing. We might be able to help them where they know where the anger is coming from, where the isolation, why he's withdrawn. All those things are explained to the teachers now. And there's an offer of support to the parents as well through that. And again, David and Elizabeth, when they talked about England, they now say many of the schools are using it as a selling point for their schools, that they are an Operation Encompass school, because parents want that, and parents will come and report it themselves because it explains how a child might be behaving. So for me, I think what that does is it helps to lift the shame and the grief that Fergal talked about. The child is no longer, it's no longer a secret. It's out there. He doesn't have to carry the burden. She doesn't have to carry the burden. She doesn't have to worry about her younger siblings below her. The other teachers can maybe do something around that. The parents know that in the school it's going to be notified. That takes the secrecy out of it as well. And the shame is starting to dissipate. It won't go totally. One of the other things that I've been promoting for a long time too is the concept of having therapists available to primary schools throughout the country. Maybe one therapist could cover 2 or 3 primary schools. So again, that may be an option for a teacher if a child needs that. But the real interagency cooperation is vital. We've got to get to a stage where the children are at the heart of it, and there's a child's rights approach where HSE and TUS, and what I've heard today sounds much more optimistic than I've ever heard in any interagency cooperation. It really sounds like you've gotten there together, and you just need to get it finalized and smoothed out and more consistent around the country. So that's really, really to your great credit, and I would really support that in any way I can. Time-wise, I'm not going to go on any longer. I just want to say thank you very much for all the phenomenal work you're all doing across the country, and particularly in Dunleary, Rathdown, Bray. Thank you very much for that work and for the invitation. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Niall. And with that, I will say thank you to all of our speakers, Dr. Niall Muldoon as the Ombudsman for Children, Barry Cullen, our coordinator of the Drugs Task Force, Nicola Corrigan and Caroline Jordan speaking to us from HSE and TUSLA respectively, Sharon McCormick from Barnardo's, Jennifer Huff from Alcohol Action Ireland. We had our Minister Frank Vane addressing us, and Audrey Dean, the chair of the Dunleary and Rathdown Drugs Alcohol Task Force, opening up. And most importantly, as I think other speakers have said, thank you to all of you. This has really been quite outstanding, not only what's been shared, but how many of us have gathered and shown our commitment to these issues, to addressing this, and ultimately to the rights of children. So thank you very much, everyone. If you would like to, you're welcome to now come off mute, say goodbye, and wish that this work is, and this gathering is a real benefit in our work going forward.